Welcome everybody to Inspiring Philosophy. I am your host for today, Than Christopoulos. Mike, I don't know where Mike is. He's flying somewhere, probably being super fancy and all that jazz. Today is our first call-in show. So there is a link in the description. I think Matt's going to be in the chat as well, resending the link if you guys can't find it. We are vetting you guys first. So we're going to try to prioritize atheists or non-Christians in general. And you guys get to come and discuss whatever you want to with these guys here, who I will be introducing now. So, Eric, people know who you are, but just really quick, who are you?
I'm the grumpy mixologist. Can't you read,
Yes.
Than? Jeez. No, I'm Eric, Testify Apologetics. I deal a lot with the historical reliability of the Gospels. I've also been dealing a lot with like Islam argument from miracles over the last couple years or a year or so. So that'd be me.
Nice. Tim, who are you?
What's up, y'all? Dude, who am I? Guys, love to be here. Thanks for having me on. Tim Howard, run Doxastic Mastery, basically teaching you how to think clearly about your beliefs, doing apologetics the right way, helping you break out of your answers addiction and move into mastering your worldview, taking ownership over the things you believe, and not just needing regurgitated answers, but being able to come to your own conclusions. So we run trainings for that, coaching for that. So all the relevant links, go check that out.
Heck yeah. And for those of you guys out there that know about like the way I try to reason about things, my methodology that I employ and all that stuff, Tim and I are like Siamese twins, but we're just not physically connected. We're just mentally connected. So if you really enjoy the argumentation that I employ, then you enjoy the things that Tim will teach you, and you should definitely go check him out and hire him as a coach. So with that being said, we are going to start doing our call-in show right away. And I know that we are probably already have some people vetted. Matt, our manager, is vetting people. So Matt, if you're listening, you can start sending people the link to get onto the lobby, and we'll let people in. I'll take super chats until that happens. Hold on. Yeah, let's just start with super chats really quick, and then we'll get going. All right, Jude 07. Since IP is gone, can IP respond to Pope Leo supposedly having abuse allegations? I haven't looked into it, so I can't really speak on that. I don't know about you guys.
No. Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know much about the Pope. I am the rightful Pope. I am the Mahdi. I don't know. There's all these other wannabe Mahdis out there.
Someone said I was that because I was wearing a beanie. So how can you?
Yeah, I put on a beanie. I put on a beanie too. So I'm the true
okay.
Mahdi.
All right, there you go. We share one nature. Okay.
People should be submitting to me anyways. So
yeah. Matt, if you want to, you can let in Juan, and you guys just as a side note, check your emails so that way you know when you get, because your StreamYard link will be sent to your email address when you get in. Cosmic, I want to give you a big fat Romans 16:16. I will greet you with a holy kiss 100%, my friend. Thank you so much.
He's Greek. He's into that.
Rian, thank you for the $10 super chat. By the way, Rian, I did see your email. I just haven't gotten back to you yet. I've been away on holiday for about a week across the pond. And so I'm just playing catch up at the moment. All right. That being said, Matt, I am waiting for Juan to get into this.
Juan?
Than reminds me of Cameron, somebody said.
It's the Hawaiian shirt, bro.
My man after midnight is Than, says that's a beautiful stash, my dude.
Look at that photo, bro.
My goodness, dude.
You get,
where is that picture? That's a recent picture.
There is sound effects there.
It's oh yeah. I forgot. I pulled up sound effects because
you reminded him, dude. He was gonna go this whole stream without sound effects, but you had to remind him.
You should have done the Riz sound effect.
All right. We're still waiting on Matt to hold on.
Just awkward silence.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm texting Matt so that way
killing the stream. We're killing the stream.
I'm just sitting in like a meditative presence right now. This is great, bro.
That's right.
I'm a little high.
Dude, I can feel the aura.
Aura. All right. Well, we'll just keep waiting. All right. The Vermin, have you seen the email I sent, Mr. Christopoulos? I did. I just have not gotten back to it yet. Again, I'm just trying to play catch up right now. I have too many emails to get to. Roken, I like your new shirt. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. This is actually a new shirt that my wife got for me because I have a wedding coming up in 2-3 weeks, and so she wanted it. I figured I'd test it out tonight.
Is the wedding
Rion,
on like a
with another $5 super chat. Thank you so much.
Is the wedding on like a shuffleboard court with some old people? You marrying?
No,
like,
man. I don't like, I don't like having the same old look all the time. So I just recycle the look. That's all. I mean, I get new looks, not recycle them. Just a friendly reminder, guys, by the way, too, as we're waiting on people to kind of get in here. You can we are prioritizing the skeptics first, and then we will bring in other people like kind of later on as they continue to come in. Just wondering why people are not getting into the lobby right now. That's all. This is kind of confusing. Tim, start talking about Bayes really quick while we're trying to figure this out.
Oh, Bayes? Yeah. I mean, if you guys, let's see. Bayesianism 101. What is Bayes? What does that word even mean? Is that even a proper name? Well, it is. There was a man named Thomas Bayes, and he came up with what we call today the modern probability calculus. It allows you to do very interesting things, like update your beliefs based on new information. There are 3 mathematical expressions for Bayes' theorem. There is your prior probabilities, there's your likelihood ratio, and there's something called a posterior. Not that one, but mathematical posterior, okay? And with these 3 things, you can go do beautiful things like compare worldviews and look at arguments in the right way. There's this idea called confirmation, which can be properly defined as a degree of credibility, right? Which is just the degree to which something can be believed, right? So a belief is either credible to some degree or it's not. That's all we got to do is just figure that out. And Bayes' theorem can help us do that. Some people think that we can't.
I'm going to pause you there for just a second. Friendly reminder, guys. If you are getting vetted through with Matt, once you click that link, you're going to go to a Zoom call to get vetted. And then after that, Matt is going to email you the link to get into this stream here. So make sure you're checking your emails if you went through that vetting process, okay? Matt just sent all the links as well. So in the meantime, okay, Tim, go ahead, finish what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say that the most probably controversial thesis here is that we can't really apply it to metaphysical claims.
Oh, we got somebody. Right? Okay. Tim, nobody cares.
Okay, let's get it. I never said it in the first place. Oh.
All right. Modern atheism. How's it going, my friend?
Good, and you?
Living a dream, man. I've talked to you before. I think. Yeah. Was it on John Steele's stream?
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
I've talked to you, bro.
Hit us, man. Yeah. What you got?
So I wanted to mention something that you guys mentioned in your latest stream, the one reacting to Red's and Alex O'Connor interview. Okay. Just wanted to respond to something and to see what will your opinion be.
Okay.
So Michael said something that is very interesting. He says that the resurrection provides, in a way, a simple and elegant and parsimonious explanation for all the data. And that's like an advantage, because if we look at a naturalistic explanation, he says that we have maybe like these ad hoc assumptions, like maybe we have to invoke some group hallucinations for something, we have to invoke a body being stolen as another thing, and we start adding like ad hoc assumptions. And in comparison to this, resurrection will be like a parsimonious explanations. So in a way, it's like Occam's razor will favor it. But I wanted to push back against this a little bit, and I had it like an analogy for this, like an example. Like imagine there was a small town, and there was a person that went missing, and a few days before, some people saw some lights in the sky. And in addition to that, we have some weak circumstantial evidence, like some guy says his TV broke down, right? So somebody could say like, okay, I think the explanation for all of this is an alien abduction, because it explains all the data in a simple way, right? It explains the missing person who was abducted. It explains the lights or the ship, and even explains the broken TV, right? With some alien interference. But obviously, I don't think the person will be right. I don't think the person will be making a rational conclusion, right? I think a more rational explanation is to say, okay, the person went missing by natural means. Then, by some chance, the lights were there because of some aircraft or something, and just by chance, the TV broke down. In a way, Occam's razon will tell us that if we know that natural things, that we know them, we know that this can account for the data, that the principle of not invoking additional entities, the supernatural entity, the aliens, will be the additional entity. So it's not correct what they say.
Do you think that the prior probability of God is as low as the prior probability of space traveling aliens that come from another world?
I think the prior given what we normally know about the world, I don't think the probability of God is super low, but I think the probability of aliens is maybe higher. I think maybe the aliens.
You think the probability of aliens being able to travel all the way from other parts of the galaxy, far beyond our galaxy, is higher than the probability for the existence of God?
Yeah, I think so.
Why? What justifies that?
I think if we
do you know the physical? Do you understand that it's basically physically impossible, and lots of scientists have been hey, this is the chances of this is basically zero.
Oh, really? No, I haven't heard of it. Honestly, I don't know how. I don't know the physics of interstellar travel.
Well, can I read it? Can I read a quote to you real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, this is Howard Smith. He's a scientist. He's writing in the American Scientist. This is an article called "Are We Alone in the Universe?" And he says, there will be no civilization if a star is too large or too small, if a planet's orbit or obliquity is wrong, if its size or chemical composition is unsuited, if it is ill-surfaced and ill-equipped, if its geologic and meteoric, history is too inauspicious, if the powerful chemistry needed to generate the first life forms is too intricate or too slow. If we are to have company in our volume of the galaxy, the likelihood on average for each of these conditions has to be pretty high, better than 20%. If the probability of some such chances of life are to form, evolve, or survive is much smaller than even the others that are 100% certain, it is unlikely that there are any stars near us hosting intelligent beings. Despite the growing catalog of extrasolar planets, the data so far does not alter the estimates we have that we are effectively on our own. And he says that it's 1 in 700 quintillion that there's the chance of this. That's bottom low. Maybe you need to look at the data yourself, but I'm just saying that's really, really small. Here's another quote. This is David Eicher. He's an astronomer. He says, the point is the distances between the objects in space are incredibly vast, even in our solar system, let alone between stars in our galaxy or other galaxies. Yes, I know technology is ever improving thing for any given civilization, and someday we may be able to travel far faster than we now believe, but physics is physics. He's talking about the physics that it takes to even get from this side of some other galaxy over into ours or whatever, or not galaxy, but you know what I'm trying to say, beyond our reach. Regardless of how technology changes, light can travel at the fastest known as speed because it has no mass. Anything with mass takes an incredible amount of energy to start moving at an impressive speed. With an ion propulsion engine, the best technology feasible idea that we have now, we could travel to the nearest star in something like 75,000 years.
Right.
And he goes on to say, but that's only if the world's politicians had unlimited budget to offer up such a project, and there is serious logistical problems too. And then how do you stock a spacecraft with enough munchies for a 75,000 year trip? So, dude, this is not the same thing as the prior probability for the existence of God.
So Modern, if you want to take a second to respond to Eric there, you can. And then I have two other worries about this counterexample as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. I never heard of this data, to be honest. Well, what if they live for millions of years for some reason, because technology made them immortal, then maybe they could travel, or maybe they could be closer, and they have technology that is so good at clocking them they are already closer that we haven't.
So you really think that the prior probability of an existence of God is people who can travel 75,000 years from distant galaxies that defies any sort of physics that we know is possible right now?
Or who are already close to us but had technology that cloaks them, makes them invisible to us.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I think you're just kind of already kind of telling off on yourself right now.
No, I mean, I don't think God, I don't think that's super impossible. Aliens, I don't think, but I don't think God is completely impossible either. That's what I don't think God is like.
But I'm trying to say that the probability of there being these kind of beings to do the particular assumption is even lower. And so, of course, we're going to prefer a natural explanation there because we know what the priors are for space traveling aliens. Whereas the prior probability for like a being like God who would want to resurrect somebody from the dead, we know is a whole lot higher than that. We can look at like Jesus's own self-claims. We can look at arguments for the existence of God. We can look at arguments for like messianic prophecy and Jesus fulfilling those prophecy. And so I'm not saying that those just get you all the way there to where it's like just a little bit of evidence will push the resurrection over. I'm not saying that necessarily because we're still talking about a miracle. And I would say that when we're looking at miracles, the prior is low, but then we have to look at the actual details of the what is actually happening. Like what details are we being given? And so your alien abduction thing is not the same as people eating meals with Jesus for a period of 40 days, him inviting them to touch his wounds, him speaking with them and appearing to them in groups, and all of these other multi-sensory things that are happening reportedly, at least in the Gospels. And so if those do go back to the original eyewitnesses and they're making that claim in the face of a hostile audience, and these are details that they can't easily be mistaken about, the kind of details that you gave, the story that you gave, the prior is on the floor, and then it's the multi-sensory details don't compare to the multi-sensory details of the resurrection. And so you're just comparing apples with oranges at this point.
Right. When you talk about all of this stuff, right, the extra evidence, I think it's no longer, we are not talking about the prior. We are talking about like the posterior, like given all the evidence.
I'm talking about both.
Yeah.
Right.
Eric is talking about the likelihood ratio of the evidence given the hypothesis relative to the evidence given any other counter hypothesis. And in this instance, it's going to be the alien hypothesis. There are other worries, though, too. So Eric gave reasons to think that the prior probability of some sort of alien hypothesis to be lower than we might expect. There's other issues at hand, too, though. So, for instance, like you might idiosyncratically think that like the alien hypothesis has a higher prior than the resurrection hypothesis, but my question might just be still why. And it sounds like based off of the conversation I'm hearing so far, one of them is going to be that you're going to make the supernatural natural distinction, and the other issue is going to be that you just think based off of the way that you might assess simplicity that theism is a more complex hypothesis than aliens. So I don't know where you want to start, but for instance, me and Tim, I don't know about you, Eric, me and Tim are actually going to deny that supernatural natural distinction. I think that we're bloating our ontology and making false ontological distinctions when they're really not there. That's not me saying that I think God is material or anything weird, right? That's me just saying I don't know what supernatural natural does that the distinction atheism and theism doesn't do, or material immaterial doesn't do. If that makes sense. I'm not real. So like theists are not introducing a different kind of entity when we're talking about God's existence. And so we don't take a prior probability hit with regards to simplicity in that aspect. That would be one of my concerns. But I'm not going to gish gallop you. I would just want to see what you have to say there. So
you don't think that immaterial, something like God, is a different kind of entity that the entities that we are used to, that we know from our experience? You think that's a different kind of entity at all? Like I mean, like if you're going to hold to if you're going to hold to quantum field theory or some interpretations of quantum mechanics, or like, I mean, yeah, we posit immaterial or unobservable entities all the time. But you can, for instance, like dark matter is one.
Gravity is an unobservable entity. There's
That's
tons of unobservable entities that we posit when we're explaining things. Somebody just got a Nobel Peace Prize for pretty much proving, right, that some sort of idealism might be true. This is pretty standard. This is pretty standard stuff once you start digging into things. Because I think the mistake you're making right now is you're going based off folk intuition and folk experience, not based off of the hard sciences that we're going off of. So if you want to assume like a materialist ontology, that's fine. But then we're going to be arguing about that. And I'm just going to push back and say materialism seems to be kind of dead, even amongst atheists right now.
So you don't think that you think gravity is an immaterial? Is immaterial? Like I think gravity is a force.
It's
what,
yeah.
What
It's a
I mean,
force.
gravity, right? But that doesn't make it like I mean, immaterial in the sense. I think in the sense that we use immaterial referring to God. You know, like spirit
No,
or
it's the
especially
same.
spiritual.
Well,
The
gravity isn't a substance. Well, some might say it is, but
not a thing.
God,
Yeah,
right?
it's a force.
But that's totally fine, right? Whether something's a substance or not doesn't really matter here, because again, just because you can point to one thing that's immaterial and say, well, that's not a substance in the same way God is a substance, that's fine. We can still point to quantum fields, for instance, or
Right.
consciousness, qualia, whatever you want to say. We can find tons of examples of things that are still going to be immaterial and a substance, or at least part of a substance. And this kind of critique still holds, if that makes sense.
Okay, I'm not sure physics will agree that a quantum field is like an immaterial thing, you know, in the sense that immaterial is used philosophically to refer to God, to refer to spirits, angels. How about what if I say spiritual or material?
Let me ask you this, because
distinction?
I think we might be special pleading here. What is the difference between an immaterial thing and an immaterial agent, aside from the fact that one is conscious and one is just going to be not conscious? Aside from those two things, what's the difference?
You say an immaterial thing and an immaterial agent. Did I go there?
Besides the fact that one's conscious and one is not.
One is a thing and one is an agent. I don't get the question really.
Well, the reason I'm asking that is because you're saying it's not immaterial in the same way God is immaterial, but they're both immaterial.
Okay, hold on. Let me rephrase the thing. Okay, what if the guy who is making the alien hypothesis say the same thing you did, or say that his hypothesis aliens are material also, and therefore not a different kind of thing, and therefore are not erase his alien hypothesis is not affected at all by Occam's ratio. He will say that.
That's going to be the second thing, right? But that wouldn't make sense, because when I have the word alien, the referent is a physical thing, right?
Yeah.
If you want to present a different hypothesis but still put that in the label alien, then that's fine. But at the end of the day, the issue that you're going to run into is going to be my second critique.
Okay.
Right. The first critique at this point, all I'm saying is the justification of the priors being higher for aliens because they're a natural thing versus a supernatural rests on a distinction that I would reject. And I think we have good reasons for that. The second critique is going to be that I think theism is a very simple explanation relative to aliens. Theism is going to be, by my account, right, something that's going to be fundamentally omnipotent, right? And I'm going to argue that omnipotence gives way to omniscience. The combination of omnipotence and omniscience gives way to omnibenevolence. Now we have perfect being theism. I'm going to say that God holds these properties in the simplest degree with no arbitrary limits. When it comes to any quantifiable properties, whether they're physical or abstract, or like immaterial properties, right? We want them to be held in the simplest way for simplicity's sake, right? And that means that it's either going to be held to an infinite degree or not held at all, right? Things that have arbitrary limits need to have explanations. If they don't have explanations, then they're brute facts. That takes away from the simplicity. So I have one entity with one property held in the simplest way possible, no arbitrary limits. And then from there, I can use value theory to kind of make predictions about what kind of world and actions God would take one of those things is going to be to become incarnate and validate that incarnation through some sort of super miracle. And you've heard me talk on the problem of evil before, so you've heard me talk about the defeat condition and how evil is going to be justifiable so long as it can be defeated. What better way to broadcast that you will defeat death itself than by conquering the grave? And
How
so
about
we have
making everyone immortal? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. I'm not. Yeah, I'm going to stop here because I don't want to gish gab. The main point I'm trying to say, the main thing I'm just trying to say here is, I think theism makes very probable things like the resurrection and all these other things. So the prior probability of the resurrection given theism is not that low. So even if you want to be an agnostic and say like 0.5 for theism, the alien hypothesis has arbitrary limits. It doesn't have a perfect nature, so we have no way of predicting what the actions of the aliens would be. So those are going to be ad hoc assumptions onto the hypothesis. In order to match the explanatory power, you have to tack on a bunch of different things, where for me, I just kind of get everything from the base hypothesis.
Okay. Now, I think you are kind of, I think that's not how simple is used in Occam's razor. I think Occam's razor is not talking about simple in the way that, oh, if I say a simple which causes this, then it's therefore a better explanation than saying a complex physical phenomena, which we know exist, is worse than the explanation a simple which, right? It's not about the which being simple or the physical phenomena being complex. It's about an entity with entities we know, or we know that exist, or entities we don't know if they exist or not. Like preferably, this most simple explanation is to take. Okay,
But
So
go ahead, Tim.
Well, I want to see if Tim wants to say anything here in a second. Yeah. So let me. I'll just say this really quickly. So because you're saying words like we know exist, entities that we don't know exist, stuff like that. Yeah. I can grant that we don't know if by knowledge you mean with like 100% certainty or something like that. We might not know that God exists with 100% certainty. Yes. But when I look at the ontology of the hypothesis I'm putting up, which is theism, right? I know that agents exist. In my background knowledge, at the very least, immaterial things exist, right? I'm just positing an immaterial entity that is an agent.
Okay.
What?
Do spiritual things exist in your background?
I don't know what you mean by the word spiritual in this context, right?
Whatever God is, his nature.
I think God is an agent that is not embodied.
Okay.
Right. But I'm introducing a category that I think already exists, which is an agent, right?
Right, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think you know what I mean by spiritual. When
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but what I'm trying to do right now, Modern, is I'm unpacking the ontology now of those words you're using. And what I'm trying to do is point out, like, yeah, you can say the word spirit, and then all I'm doing right now is unpacking the properties of that word spirit, which is agent and immaterial, and saying we're not introducing something new, right? Like, for instance, let's just say for example, right? I said, hey, I know a guy named Richard who has orange skin, right? Well, I'm just introducing a person that has a name, that has skin, and it's just a color that's a little bit different than you've ever seen before, right?
But you're introducing persons with orange skin, which we don't know exists. We haven't established those exists. So
you don't have to know. You don't need to know with 100% certainty that people with orange skin exist, right? All I'm trying to say is the prior probability is just not going to be that low, right? Because the fact that he has orange skin is the only thing that's kind of like weird about this,
right? So
now, when it comes to God, I'm not introducing anything weird. That's the thing. Agent, immaterial, and has the property of power fundamentally. Those are all properties that we know, at least for me, right? I know those types of things exist. I'm not introducing anything new.
No, but so are you telling me that if someone tells you, I know a guy with orange skin, I just saw him, you're gonna to take his word for it, like there's nothing, like, oh sure, oh really, okay, that's like it. You're gonna believe in like it's nothing. You're not gonna consider this an extraordinary case because both things exist, because orange and skin exist. Now, if someone says I know a guy with orange skin
if you
that
have
makes
if,
that.
if you have his testimony and you know it's somebody that's reliable and you know the context makes it unlikely that he's lying and the content of his claim makes it unsure that he's mistaken, and you should have used Donald instead of Richard.
I was actually gonna say Orange Man Bad, but so because remember that one question right there is not a one-to-one correspondence to the resurrection, because we never should be assessing probabilities in isolation of prior probabilities or in isolation of one individual data point. In fact, different data points are going to contextualize how we should actually ascertain the likelihood ratio of other evidence, if that makes sense, right?
Okay.
Go ahead. And then I'm going to give Tim the floor before we bring on somebody else. Go ahead, Modern.
Oh, no, what I'm saying is, no, my point is that a guy with orange skin, in a vacuum, right? The statement is, it requires good evidence to believe it, because it is weird. It doesn't matter if we know that orange exists as a color and we know that skin exists as a thing. The orange skin, we know that orange, nobody has orange skin, except maybe our president. But because of that, of course, it's a normally general improbable thing. Now, what Eric says, of course, if the guy is very reliable and this and that increases the probability of the a priori improbable claim. But of course, it's a priori in a vacuum. Of course, it's like an extraordinary claim. Wouldn't you agree?
So I said I would let Tim talk here, so I'm gonna yield the mic here.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple places I could have jumped in, but I think it's very interesting because we're talking about, I feel like in this conversation, we're going back and forth between something that's evidential. So we're talking about like the likelihood, and then we're just talking about prior probabilities. The one thing that I think that needs a little bit more of explaining here is, there's several factors, there's several markers that we use when we go about prior probability judgments, right? And one of the things that I'm going to say is, I agree with you that background knowledge helps, right? But there's moments where you're appealing the background knowledge and then you're using that to underdetermine simplicity. But then there's other moments where you're like, oh yeah, like simplicity is really, really good in sacrificing background knowledge. I think we need both. And I think Than isn't going to say that we should be jettisoning both. I think that background knowledge considerations can be helpful as like a low resolution guide. I don't think it should be our highest resolution guide, because it's not the only criterion we use to assess when we're not just looking at the evidence. And one of the things I want to ask you, man, is what do you think the criterion are, like all of the criterion are, when you're assessing the plausibility of an explanation? What are those criteria? Can you name those off specifically for me real fast?
I guess it's hard to say. When someone, I will see how good it matches the rest of all my knowledge. That's like the main thing, like how plausible it is based on what I know about, what I generally know about the world. I think it's the question is a bit too general.
Okay, I can work with that. So let me ask you this then. Let me ask you something. When do you believe personally that it is a valid and legitimate move to appeal to an unobservable entity? Are you familiar with the unobservable entity kind of concept here? And I don't mean immaterial. Sure. I'm not talking about anything supernatural. I don't mean that. I mean like what physicists do, what we call theoretical postulations, what black holes originally were, what quarks were originally were, what the Higgs boson originally was, what many things still are. Okay. There were originally theoretical postulations. When do you think it is valid to introduce those things into a picture when we're talking about explanation?
I guess when the observable entities cannot explain the thing correctly, right? So you have to use the unobservable entities, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I think that all of us here would agree that we should look for another explanation if things that, let's say that all we're appealing to so far, just out of happenstance, is just things that we directly observe, if that's not cutting it right, then yeah, we're going to have to postulate something else. But the reason why, though, is because we already have an idea of what criterion we're measuring good explanations against. And that criterion isn't just, do we know about it or do we not know about it? That's a very loose and naive way to look at how we infer, quote unquote, the best explanation. There's actually 13 criterion that you can actually systematize. If you take the extant scientific literature together and see how epistemologists and scientists actually view theories, you can actually group them into 13 different criterion. So far, you've been focusing on like maybe 2, which is like background knowledge. So the only thing I want to say, just leave you here, right, is we need to look at more. There's other things that are going to influence our plausibility judgments here. And I think that if you paint a picture with such a narrow set of criterion, it just doesn't, it sets us up for a false picture.
Okay, good. Nice.
Modern, thank you so much for coming up, man. It was a
Thank
pleasure
you very much
talking
for
to you
having
again,
me. Okay, great.
we'll probably be doing more of these if this keeps going
That's
going
cool.
well.
Yeah,
So
that's
please,
very nice.
please come on up,
Okay.
and you
Yeah,
guys,
thank
honestly, too, for everybody listening and in the chat and everything, like if you guys like this, let us know this so that way we can keep them going. Yeah. All right, Modern, I'm gonna kick you out. Thanks again for coming in, man.
Thank
I
you
really
very much.
appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, bye. Bye, Eric.
Yeah, see you.
Okay.
All right. Give everybody, give Modern Atheism a round of applause for being so fun there. Awesome dude. Really liked him.
Respectful.
Yeah, dude, he's awesome. I love respectful conversations like that. All right. Next, we got Nail coming up.
Wow,
Nail,
I didn't expect to be here so quick.
I mean, I can kick you out and bring somebody else up if you want.
Nah, no. I mean, I don't know if you. I was in what is it called, vetting with a certain Matt, and I'm assuming he told you something about me.
I got. Yeah, but go ahead and introduce yourself again. For the vetting process is just so that way we don't get weirdos up here, man.
Okay.
There's people that will try to do some really nasty stuff on a stream like this, and that's all.
Okay. Well, first of all, hello. I'm mainly here because of the Mr. Grumpy McPologist. I'm a big fan of his videos. I haven't really heard of Tim or you. Dan, I don't know how to pronounce, but basically, I consider myself a Christian, but I do have, I guess you could say, some mystical questions about it. I'm here specifically because of basically the modern view. Well, it's not really modern, it has existed for several hundred years. The view on how the Torah, or not the Torah, the book of Genesis is metaphorical. Basically, it's not just that, it's also the fact that with time and with the advancements of science, especially the discovery of, well, you could say discovery, but the theory of evolution, how man has changed his perspective on, has sort of went to a more, I guess you could say, his views have adapted to the science of the modern day. Basically, why that is, I'm just here to have a civil discussion. I'm not here to debate, to argue. I just want to have a friendly little chat. It's nothing to be,
of course,
nothing to be angry about. But I will start right away with the first question. Basically, why is it that the Torah or the book of Genesis is seen as metaphorical? Can you guys explain?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying this: the modern like young Earth creationist view that you're probably used to hearing about is actually a very new view. That's probably like maybe 400 years old. It actually started with Seventh-day Adventism. Now, if you look at the early church and even like pre-Christian understandings of Genesis, like Philo of Alexandria, for instance, was a pre-Jesus Jewish author, and he took an allegorical understanding of Genesis. If you look at the early church, you can look at other early church fathers, and they have more of an allegorical and metaphorical understanding of Genesis. And this is pre-Darwin, obviously, then, right? And so it's not that Christianity's has evolved in response to evolution. in this way. It seems like what might be happening is maybe you heard or ran into young earth creationists before and thought, oh, okay, well, this is the default view, and then ran into Christians that argued against that and had a view that is more compatible with evolution, and thought maybe they're just twisting the words a little bit to make it fit evolution. But the way I read Genesis and the way Tim reads Genesis or Mike reads Genesis, I don't know how Eric reads it necessarily, so I'm not going to speak for him.
I'm not a young earth guy, but
okay.
Yeah.
We read it based off of how we think is the right way to interpret it. In other words, if I found out today that the earth was actually 6,000 years old and that evolution was fake, I would still read Genesis the way I read it. So we can start, like, I'm just putting that on a table before we start getting into like some hermeneutics or anything like that.
Okay, so when you say young earth creationism, that is basically the 6,000-year-old earth theory, right?
Yep.
Well, I mean, is it basically the thing that the Bible states? Well, what we assume the Bible states, because you put the timelines and things like that, you just assume it's 6,000 years old, right? I mean, I'm not really too deep into it, because you said that the Mormons, or the Seventh-day Adventists, they're Mormons,
yeah,
right?
Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah, okay, they're the ones who started the whole idea of that, right?
The modern conception of it, yes.
Okay, so so
Basically,
basically,
to be clear, there were other like sects and groups of Christians and Jews that probably interpreted things literally as well, but those debates were around before the onset of scientific theorizing on evolution or anything like that.
Yeah.
But you
Can I ask
personally, okay, sorry, can I speak?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead now.
So basically, you personally believe the Earth is not 6,000 years old, but rather however much it is old. I don't
Whatever
know
the science says. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, if you were, I don't know, born in a period before people, actually got the numbers and the science right, you would probably believe what the Book of Genesis says, right? Would you? What do you think?
I don't know what I would believe in a different timeline, because I don't know what other information I would have access to or not have access to, right?
Okay,
but
fair.
Here's what I can tell you. Again, if today that all the scientists were like, hey guys, Earth's 6,000 years old, and by the way, like evolution, fake.
Right.
I would still read Genesis the way I did, because Genesis, by my lights, Genesis doesn't tell us anything about what the age of the earth is, what the age of the universe is. It doesn't tell us about the material origins of humanity either. I don't think that's what's happening. So we can get into this if you want to, but here's the basic bird's eye view. I think, for instance, the 7 days of creation, I think there's a motif happening there. I think that's just God inaugurating the cosmos as his temple, because when you look at the number 7, it's always about temple inauguration, priestly inauguration, or something like that. For 7 days of creation, it's just a symbolic way of saying that the cosmos is Yahweh's temple. Other things to kind of point to as well are going to be, for instance, the fact that, like, when you look at the Hebrew word bara, it's not necessarily going to be about material origins. So, for instance, think about that psalm that says, "Create in me a clean, O heart, O God." The Hebrew word for create there is bara, but very clearly the word bara there is not saying, like, out of nothing create a new thing within me, which is a new heart, right? He's saying create in me a new heart, but really what the elocution is like, hey, this heart that I have, shape it into something new, right? And so, for instance, in Genesis, then, when we see the word create, more often than not, I think what's going on is that things that already existed are being shaped into something new or purposed for a particular function. When it comes to Adam and Eve, there's lots of ancient literature and new literature on Adam and Eve, for instance, and how to interpret that. But there's nothing in there that tells us that Adam and Eve are the first humans in the biological sense. Again, Genesis isn't asking or trying to talk about anything scientific. it's giving us more of a theological account of the grand meta narrative of reality, right? And so Adam and Eve you could read it and think, hey, they're the first humans in Eden. But I think the better reading is going to be that they were the first humans elected to be the first, like the first priest and priestess.
The ones in the garden.
What?
To be in the garden, you could say.
Yeah,
right?
and bring Eden out to the rest of the earth.
Right, makes sense. Tim wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Just a helpful clarification. Because I heard this a little bit in kind of when you opened up here. Another thing that I also just want to point out is, there's like two extremes, and Than and myself are going to fall somewhere in the middle. That's kind of usually how it happens. But there's another extreme where, as science progresses, people will read that science back into the Bible. I also want to let you know that's also not what that's not the only other option on the table. So you're talking about how either we let the scriptures, we adopt a certain interpretation, like some kind of literalism, and then we allow that to tell us, oh, well then, the earth is young and there's two literal people, right? The other extreme, so not the other view, but the other extreme, right? So we're thinking about these things in terms of a spectrum. The other extreme is going to be, oh yeah, the Big Bang's in the Bible or evolution is the Bible. And we're also not saying that as well. The main thing that we're saying is the story of Genesis has never been about trying to historically recreate biology or astronomy. And one reason why we're going to say that is that simply wasn't the mindset or the consciousness of the readers who the actual work was intended for. The author, so we always have to match the intention of the author with the actual audience, right? And that right there can reveal a lot. So we're also not saying that you can find evolution in the Bible. I actually am one of those Christians. I don't like that. It's actually called concordism. I actually oppose that. Now there's certain major apologists such as like Hugh Ross who will say that you can find dark matter revealed in the book of Job. I think that's a poor hermeneutic to adopt, even though I love Hugh Ross's work. I think he's a great guy. I think he's done a lot for the kingdom, but I think that's also an equally, you don't want to go to that extreme. So you find yourself somewhere in the middle where Genesis just isn't that story. And that's where Than gets that idea from, where it's evolution's true, evolution's false, Big Bang is true, Big Bang is false. It doesn't change how we view the story. Why? Because we are trying to read it the most faithful way we can, which is how it was first preserved for the original audience, how it was intended. That's going to be the reading. The second thing I want to say is there's no view from nowhere. And you might think that there's a default view, which is going to be literalism, but we have to check our presuppositions there. One of the reasons why we have to check our presuppositions there is because try to read the entire Genesis 1 through 11 literally. It's actually impossible. You actually can't do it. You will run into metaphor eventually. And so there's really no view from nowhere. So at some point, you have to be able to have some kind of prior metric or methodology that you're using to employ that tells you when you read a text a certain way. And all Than and I, and I believe Eric as well, we're going to say, yeah, we have different ways of doing that. And this is not going to result in compromise or anything like that. So that's the only thing I want to say as far as a clarification. So I don't know if that was at all relevant to what you're saying. If it is, I'm glad it was. If not, feel free to ask any questions about that.
I'm very happy that you guys being really clear with your answers, especially Than really explained it really well. I haven't really ever heard of that kind of explanation before. So basically, you guys concluded that there is no strictly metaphorical. You can't really see it strictly metaphorically, but you can't really see it strictly literally. And I actually myself do see it that way as well. I just really wanted to see you guys, your own opinion. Basically, how I see it is, it's supposed to be, the whole Bible itself, not just this story, is supposed to be a sort of theological lesson to teach us something. Maybe not always supposed to be taken at face value, not always supposed to be taken as just some story. Basically, it's supposed to be taken as a lesson for man to increase his sort of moral compass, the range of it, to be more knowledgeable on morality and certain things of that sort, which is basically the thing which was necessary for the people of that time period. What is it, like 5,000 years ago?
What I would say is, I'm just going to quote Michael Heiser here and say that when you're reading the Hebrew Bible, you want the early Israelite living in your head when you're reading the text.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you're reading the New Testament, you want the Second Temple Jew or Christian living in your head when you're reading the text. If you haven't read Heiser's work on any of this kind of stuff, I highly recommend checking out Heiser. But was this helpful for now, Neil? Like we don't have all the time in the world to kind of dig into all the details here.
Oh yeah, right. I'm sure you're really busy, right? Okay. I mean, I do have one more, like, I guess, aspect of the book of Genesis. If you give me your thoughts on it. So, would you guys agree that the sword is an invention of mankind, or well, humanity, a weapon? It's an invention of humanity, right? Why would first of all, I don't know if you have the Bible memorized or open up somewhere, but basically open up Genesis chapter 3 verse 24. Do you have it somewhere? Can you like read
I'm
it?
pulling it up.
Okay.
About the flaming sword going around the tree of life.
Yep. Yeah, it is. So my question is, if it is, not an issue, we're basically gonna be done here in a few minutes. It's okay. Why is it that an invention of like something that man has invented, why is it used like if it is metaphorical, it would make sense, but if it is to be taken at a sort of literal reading, why would there be a sword? Something that humanity, if we are to assume that Adam and Eve were one of the first humans, why would there be a sword there if man is the one that invented it? Hundreds of years later.
So, for one, I don't think Adam and Eve were the first humans.
One of the first humans. I
don't even think that we have good reason for thinking they are one of the first humans either. I just don't know why we should assume that. There's nothing in the text that really implies that. But also, I actually don't know that the theology of the early Israelite would say that man invented the sword. If you look at a lot of the Second Temple literature, you're going to see that there's going to be talks about rebelling Elohim and all this other stuff. And if you look at Second Temple literature, like there's a lot of literature talking about like the rebelling gods of the nations actually teaching humanity about weaponry and all this other stuff. And so I don't know that we need to even make the assumption that this is an invention of the human.
So you think
that being said, if the sword just didn't exist or anything like that prior to this, well, this isn't like a flying drone footage type thing either of what happened, right? So, I mean, Genesis wasn't written at the same time that any of these events probably happened. This is
written by Moses.
Like you got to still ask the question, like, okay, well, who wrote this? Why did they write this? And what is this text doing for these people that it's written to? So, there's a lot of things to unpack there, but based off what I'm like kind of just sharing with you at least momentarily here, I think you can kind of see really quickly that this is kind of a non-issue.
Truly, it is. I mean, I just want to, get on here a little bit, maybe talk to you guys a little bit. I mean, It wasn't really supposed to be, I guess you could call it a productive conversation, just, wanted to chat.
This is great. This is great.
You're good.
All right, Nail, I'm going to let you go, and we're going to get to some super chats.
Thank you very much.
People. Thank you so much.
Good meeting you.
All right, boys, we're going to get some super chats going, and then we'll get to our next guest. You guys having fun? How are you feeling?
Dude, this is great. I'm enjoying myself.
Awesome.
Based.
All right.
Really nailed it there. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Dawa Troll P-Bum says, I challenge the real Mahdi to
bring it. You know, Giant DOC, you guys might not follow them, but I do. And DOC, they're back on YouTube. She said that I look like the real Mahdi. So
you do.
She said it.
You actually do. Yeah.
She said compared to IP and AP, I had the right amount of scraggly gray beard.
Yeah, facts.
So you're gonna lose this Mabahala, Dawatro. Mabahala.
All right. This guy says, Mom, I want IP. Mom, no, we have IP at home. IP at home only.
Love that.
I like the double joke there because only fans, but it is only me. And I know you guys don't like me as much as Mike. I'm not as popular, but you'll learn to like me more. Don't worry. Thank you so much for the super chat. I like those thick mathematical posteriors. Thank you so much, Cosmic. Dylan, how many times was Jesus anointed with oil? Seems every gospel is a bit different. I think there's 3 total, right, Eric? I don't remember off the top of my head. 3 mentions, right? But like some gospels might not mention others.
I think it's actually only in Mark. Jesus anointed with oil?
Well, Luke,
right. I'm
mentions
reading this
it.
wrong. I'm reading it all wrong. Different contradictory or just different? You know,
different. Different numbers isn't going to be contradictory.
Yeah.
So
I don't see it as a problem unless there's a
we're gonna need some verses if you're gonna say like there's a contradiction or something. But just because like one gospel might mention 2 and one gospel might mention 3 of them doesn't really mean they're disagreeing.
Many times. Well, like I know there's Luke, and like it happens, but that's just a different situation. The way that it's described, it's a completely different woman. I know some people are like, oh, Luke is just kind of being creative and he's working in the same anointing. No, it's a totally different story.
Yeah. You guys still panicking about Rhett?
dude, the moment I read that, I'm not gonna lie, a little bit of pee just came out.
Dude,
I should have worn my depends.
My heart rate just shot up to 97 beats per minute because of that.
Hey, are you guys still panicking about Wes Huff? How many Wes Huff
Huff derangement syndrome?
Why are we still making Wes Huff live streams, everybody? Y'all are still reacting to Wes Huff.
Dude, it's insane. It's
and
so
you get
funny
upset
to me.
when we respond to Rhett. It had like 2 million views and he made a bunch of not great arguments. What do you expect?
Christians.
No, we don't say anything, do you know what you guys do? Oh, you see, Rhett has obliterated them. He humiliated them. You can't win.
I know, dude. Christians, wow, we're really sad about Rhett's story, and he made some really bad arguments. Let's correct those. Atheists, Christians are losing their minds. Dude, come on. Do you hear yourself? All right. I'm praying that the Lord uses you all to further his kingdom through this live stream and your ministries as a whole. Also, you're short.
Wow.
Thank you for the prayers. And yeah, I am short. I'm 5'7", but I'm bigger than you. Boom.
What are we talking about? Don't
muscles, Eric. Come on,
See, look, where is IP? This is gay. That's the very next super that comes up. It just walks right into it. Just saying. I'm shorter than Than. I'm an inch shorter than Than.
Are you really?
5'6". Yeah.
Couldn't be me, man.
Breads is always mean to me. So
I'm also old, so you don't know. Like, am I Zacchaeus? Like,
this is so dead. Please move on. I know the streams are always not as popular when Mike's not in here. I can't do anything about it. I don't know. Do you guys like? I'm funnier than Mike. I'm prettier than Mike. I'm younger than Mike. What is it? What is it? Do I need a goatee? Is that what I need to do?
Can't be the
All right. God is the weird object you need to show exists in reality. So here's the thing. What does the word weird mean here? Because again, during that conversation, I was pointing out that the properties that God has as a hypothesis is not so different than the other properties of other objects that we already accept as potential hypotheses. And the other thing is that we don't have to show something exists in reality to use it as a hypothesis in the first place. If that was true, then throughout the theory of evolution, throughout the theory of abiogenesis, because, hey, we didn't show those things existed in reality before we hypothesized those things in the first place. So just be careful about the things you're saying, because, again, more often than not, I think you're putting up a double standard and special pleading with your special rules that you're putting for theism compared to the other things you already believe in. Are Adam and his fall allegorical? No, I think the fall is real. I just think people misunderstand what the fall is. That's the short version. If you want the long version, we at MP have a Genesis 1 through 11 series that I highly suggest you go check out. Paulus. Aliens travel as fast as light but can't land their spacecraft and crash privately. Also, lying or other motives are a recursive perspective social inference. Mean God hypothesis for resurrection is better. Heck yeah, brother.
Yeah, goes hard.
Based.
Darthan, my army of skeptics will defeat you all.
I love these. I love these.
That's good.
So funny, man. Christian Killian, any of you seen vids from a messenger of truth? Why does that sound familiar?
I've seen the guy. He's a very opinionated.
What does he do?
Is he a
I think he's
oneness guy?
Calvinist, and I
Oh.
know he's an annihilationist. And
Is he
Oh, is
black
he
guy?
is he kind of like black, has curly hair?
Yeah.
yeah,
I've
Yeah,
heard
he
of them
said
before.
I wasn't a Christian. Yo, that
Really?
guy.
he's super
Yeah.
opinionated. He's got
He's
some
been
good.
nice to me.
He's got okay takes, but
Bro,
then he's
can't
like-
see fan. This is just the dynamic we have, bro.
But then he has like some takes that I just don't agree with, and I don't know, man.
Fan,
I don't know.
oh my
I don't
God.
know.
I'm sure I got
He-
takes that you don't agree with.
He seems okay. He seems okay. I don't agree with him about his. He made a video like God makes people sick and kills them, and I'm like,
Oh.
no.
Yeah.
Scarlet Phoenix, chicken jockey.
Chicken jockey.
All right.
So I work with middle school and grade school people. So thank you. I've never heard that before.
I don't even know what it means. So
You're better.
does the
off.
table of nations spreading across the world aid the regional flood view in that they're all A&E and Mediterranean nations? Possibly, but I think that's like, even though I'm a regional flood guy, I think that'd be like making a mountain out of a molehill, evidentially speaking, because also that's all the nations that they would have really known about. So it's compatible with kind of both views, I think. But once you contextualize that data point, I guess with the rest of the narrative, it might make more sense, though. Yeah. All right, Ramon, it's $1 super chat. Thank you so much, Ramon. With that, we're gonna bring on our next guest. So we will bring on Paul as our next guy.
It's unbelievable. My AirPods just died literally as you brought me up. That's unfortunate.
Really?
Wait, hold on. Let me pull. Actually, I'm only wearing one. Let me pull my other one in.
I mean, you sound fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because of that. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, it didn't go through the other AirPod.
OnlyFans premium subscriber. Okay,
Oh
so
yeah. I'm keeping you guys afloat. Don't worry.
yeah, I'm curious now. Well, hit us, man. What's going on?
Yeah, no. So I am a new Christian. I've been my whole life mainly agnostic, atheist views. But not too long ago converted to Christianity. I found it historically the most compelling, and I guess my perspective was I kind of brought it down to two possibilities. Either there is a God or there isn't. And if there is, then I believe Christianity is the correct God. Or, like, you know what I mean, the correct perspective. And I should say that I find it to be more compelling that there is a God than that there isn't. And therefore, I believe Christianity is true, because I think that if there is a God, then Christianity is the correct perspective. So my questions are a little bit more like just kind of specific things, like maybe Trinitarian types of questions, if that works for you guys.
Yeah, let's just try to limit it to once, because we're already an hour in, and we need to try to move a little bit faster than we have been.
Yeah, okay, no problem at all. So let me ask then. All right, let's talk about the aseity of the Father. I know, at least I've heard Mike talk about the fact that he believes that only the Father has aseity and that only the Father is the one true God. And that's something that, like, definitely really is confusing to me. And so I kind of like to talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I don't know actually if that's true. If Mike,
Yeah, I've never heard Mike say that. There might be a misunderstanding somewhere.
Maybe. I definitely have heard
Yeah.
him say that only the Father has aseity. I think, at least, like, unless like you said, I misunderstood it. But
Yeah,
what is the
I
correct-
think in the most recent live stream with Joshua C. Jawadi, I remember there was agreement between them that aseity is not an intrinsic, but it's actually something extrinsic, and so you retain that ontological equality, as we put it, amongst all three persons. That way, I think that Mike agreed with that.
Well, so I mean, what do you mean by you retain that ontological quality? Like, is Jesus begotten of the Father? Still, is that still?
No. What I'm saying is what Mike is saying is that if aseity is so let's just unpack the monarchical view here for a second.
Okay.
If the Father is the source and he sources, I'm going to use the word source loosely here. If the Father sources the Son and the Spirit, right?
Sure.
But only the Father has aseity and the Son and the Spirit don't. Then you kind of run into something which is like, okay, well then the divine nature, right? There's something about the divine nature that only the Father has. That's not in terms of relational distinctness. So the only distinctness that should be had in the Trinity is in terms of that relational distinctness. On this view, then if the Father is only one that has aseity and the Son and the Spirit don't, then they're not going to be ontologically equal in that way. So Joshua Sujawadi came on the channel recently, and he says, yeah, so we're going to say it's not going to be intrinsic because obviously the Son and the Spirit are sourced, right? So they are dependent on the Father. So to retain dependency, but also ontological equality, aseity is not something that's had intrinsically, it's had something extrinsically, while the Father still maintains his privileged status of being the monarchy, right? Of being the head, the unsourced source. So the Son is still begotten, the Spirit's still spirated. That's how that works.
Okay. I mean, and I get that. So you're basically saying that the Father is the fount of deity, like he's the monarchy. Okay, so but doesn't that implies subordination then, does it not?
So there's a charge. This is a common charge. I don't recall how Joshua C. Jawadi specifically, the reason why I cite him is because he's the main proponent of this model. I don't recall specifically in detail how he kind of fleshes this part out. Than, do you recall how he?
Not at the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, because
I would
there's
recommend going back on that stream and watching through
Yeah.
that. Did you watch that
Yeah.
stream of Sujawadi, Paul?
No, I didn't.
I would highly recommend going through and watching that because that was a
Okay.
meaty conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like
Okay,
some,
so he's kind of
there's
addressing-
tricky little metaphysical details in there and everything like that.
Well,
Right,
sure.
I
and like I get that it
off
can-
the top of my head, and somebody actually just said it too, in the chat. It's going to be a relational subordination, not ontological subordination.
I get that. Like that, I understand that, but if origin determines one's existence, how can the Father be co-equal with the Son and the Spirit if origin determines your existence?
Let's be strict with our speech here. What does origin determines existence means? I keep get out our prepositions.
Yeah,
expand the
okay.
propositions there. What does that mean?
Okay, so in other words, this, like you said earlier, Tim, that the Son is dependent. The Son's and the Spirit's existence are dependent on the Father, and the Father's existence is dependent on no one. And if something has a dependent existence, and another thing does not have a dependent existence, I don't understand how they could be co-equal, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah. So I think what you mean there is when you say origin determines existence. What do you think is lacking in the Son in terms of the divine nature that is made up by the Father?
What do I think is lacking in the Son in terms of his divine nature that is made up by the Father? Oh, you're saying, are you asking like what quality he doesn't have, maybe that?
Yeah. So just take the divine nature, right? So let's just take the internal logic of the Trinity, right?
Okay.
Yeah, they all share the same divine nature. But you're saying that there's something about this origin business going on that's going to say, actually, no, that's actually not going to be the case here. Kind of flesh that out, what that means, because what that would imply is that there's actually something about the Father in terms of the divine nature that actually isn't available to the Son, and it's not in terms of anything relational, right? So it's going to be intrinsic there. So
Well-
what do you think that is?
Maybe the ability to beget eternal beings that are coexistent with themselves.
Yeah, I would say that would be a relational characteristic, right? It is a part of being the fatherhood, the person of the Father. It is that which is the one that gives forth to the Son. That's what we would say. It is, and depending on if you go Orthodox or if you accept the filioque or you don't. If you reject the filioque, you say it's also one where of spiration, right? So this is going to be a relational matter. Like this is what would be distinguishing the persons there. There's other ways you can do that, but I would just say that would be a way of distinguishing persons. I wouldn't say it'd be a way of distinguishing the core nature. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, okay, like I get what you're saying. I guess you're kind of like trying to
We can
distinguish-
just letting you guys know we gotta as much fun as this is, we gotta move on here pretty soon.
Okay, all right. I have
so-
let me like kind of sum it up with one thing, and then I'll let you respond, and I'll let you have the last word. Not that I'm letting you do anything, you're the host, but you know what I mean. So okay, I guess a good way maybe to phrase it, and maybe from a little bit of a different perspective, would be like, okay, all right, let me put it this way: is there a single example outside of Christian Trinitarian theology where something can be caused, derived, or begotten, and still considered fully self-existent and independent in its being, in its own being? You know what I mean? Like, is there any other example of that where that makes sense?
Are you saying, and just for clarification's sake, are you saying that do we have an example? So outside of Trinitarian Christian theology, do you have an example where something can be self-existent but derives its existence from something else?
Well, whether it can be caused or begotten, and at the same time still considered fully self-existent and independent. And that's not to say, like, is there an actual example? Because obviously we're assuming Christianity is true in this case. But I'm saying, if you were to apply this logic to anything else that you were to make up yourself, you know what I mean? Like, does it make sense? Does it like pass the smell test? You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, my worry here is that let's just say the answer is no. There are no other examples that we can think of. But it doesn't really follow from there that this is a false model then, or that the prior probability is lower or anything like that.
Well, I mean, the point isn't necessarily to say that the probabilities. It's to kind of question the internal coherence of the doctrine in general. If you know what I mean, like if you can't put it into perspective in another sense that you can logically just like explain and be like, okay, this is why.
Well, I would push back, and I know that we got to kind of move on, but I would push back. I don't think I don't think that we need to be boxed in like that. I think that you can articulate metaphysical models just by elaborating the content of said model and then seeing if it's inconsistent with the rules of right reasoning. I mean, that's kind of how people do that just generally, right? So
okay,
I don't.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean that's what I would say there, and like Than said, I mean it's okay. This turns out to be the case, right? We just kind of adjust our understanding here, but I mean, if we don't have to, then we shouldn't. But we should always have justification if we're going to make changes. So
yeah. Well, yeah, no, Tim. I really like what you were kind of saying, like in your intro about addiction to answers, because that's kind of something that I have like a really big problem with, as you can see. Like I kind of dive too deep, and I really want to understand. Like I want to understand, but I don't want to force it, and I do want to get to know Jesus in the most meaningful and important way possible. So I might reach out.
Yeah, totally go ahead, man. I'm easy to reach on email and on my Instagram specifically. I don't know if my links are in the description or not. Man, I haven't checked, but yeah,
Matt made
totally.
the description, so I have no clue. But
okay, yeah, Doxastic Mastery. Either send me a DM on Instagram or send me an email. You can go to my website and all that. So we can follow.
All right.
Awesome, man.
Paul,
Yeah, thank
sorry
you so
we
much.
didn't have too much more time here, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. You answered my
go check-
questions very well.
Definitely go check out that stream we did with Sijuwadi. It's really meaty, and
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Tim and I are two peas in a pod. So if you talk to him, I trust in his abilities to be able to kind of help you work through a lot of this stuff, man. Thank you so much for coming, man.
Yeah, thank you, and go Yankees.
I just like the hat, man. I'm not.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I'll see you guys. Thanks again.
Later. All right. Next, we got Andrew. Andrew, we can't hear you, brother. We still can't hear you.
Nope.
Nope. Check your
got 5
mic
seconds.
settings or anything. If you don't figure this out in a few seconds, I'm not gonna kick you. I'm just gonna remove you until you get it figured out, and I'll bring up somebody else. That's all.
Here, can you hear me?
Oh,
Yep.
there we go.
Yep.
There we go,
Yep,
man.
we're good.
Oh, wow. Oh, my finger was on the trigger, man.
Welcome to the call, man. What you got, brother?
A lot of very good stuff. Let me get my stuff right here. I wanted to talk about Romans 9 and the concept of free will. So it says in Romans 9 that God has mercy on who he has mercy and judges who he judges. And that, well, God doesn't say this, but Paul says this.
Mhm.
And then Paul compares it to, has the potter no right over the city to make out the same lump one vessel for one honorable use and another for dishonorable use? So he's really doubling down on this idea that we're predestined to our final destination, eternal separation from God or eternal being with God, and there's nothing we can really do about it. So how does that jive with free will? I looked at Michael's content on free will, and he didn't really seem to talk about Romans, more so just physics, which is cool, but it's not really biblical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say really quickly. I think you're reading predestination in the fatalistic sense into what Paul's writing here, and I think we can know that too with a high degree of confidence, especially when we actually look into what Paul's saying, who he's saying it to, and in reading the verses that from the Hebrew Bible that Paul's quoting. So when, for instance, when Paul mentions Jacob and Esau, for instance, right? Paul's not talking about individuals there because Jacob and Esau are not individuals in the Hebrew Bible, at least not in the passages that Paul's referencing. Jacob and Esau are individuals, but Jacob and Esau are used as place names to refer to collective people groups. So you can think about election, for instance, to be corporate, not individual. And so, go ahead.
So it would be God condemning all of a certain group to hell and another group to heaven? Because if we're talking about collectives, individuals make up collective groups.
Well, this is the problem. This is one of the problems. Election is not salvation. Was Israel the elect nation of God?
Yes.
Is all of Israel saved?
Not every individual.
Correct. So can election does election logically equal salvation?
Not necessarily, but do you have to be elected in order to be saved?
Do you have to be elected? It depends on what you're elected for, right? Election is a purpose. So like Adam and Eve were elected, right, to be the first priest and priestess. Israel was elected to be the vessel by which the Messiah is brought about. And so election isn't always salvation. Election can be salvation, but it's about a function that people serve. And that's what Paul's talking about in Romans specifically here, right?
Well, isn't the context of Romans that it being saved and stuff? It's are you saved by faith or works? And then a part of the in conversation of being saved, it's, hey, God predetermines a group to be saved and a group to not be saved.
Right. But again, just because that's being mentioned there doesn't mean that the specific words about election are being used in that sense then, right? Because again, Paul connects election, and Paul connects these potter and clay verses, right, to Jacob and Esau, which were verses that are about Israel being God's favored nation for election over the other nations.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I also have another, that's a really good way of viewing it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I also have another thing. It's about the fine-tuning argument and survivorship bias. These are just notes
Okay.
for myself.
If we can try to knock this one out quickly, because that first one was fast.
So basically, the whole thing goes that the fine-tuning argument is basically that God created the universe in a very specific way, and we can see certain cosmological constants being in a very certain way that if they were slightly different, they would not be able to produce life. Now, what I have to say to that is I don't really think that's a good argument for the existence of God, because if the cosmological constants weren't aligned, then we wouldn't be here to talk about it.
Yeah. So my question there to anybody that's going to use that objection is, how is that an objection? In other words, like, is that actually explaining the data, or is it just pointing out something fairly obvious? Like, for instance, analogously, if there was a murder and we were investigating the murder, I might just say, well, the only reason we're investigating the murder in the first place is because there's some laws put in place that allow me to go in as a detective and nobody else. So I just can't really make the conclusion that somebody murdered this guy.
Yeah.
Right. In the same way, just because, like, yeah, we are in a position to observe some data doesn't somehow undermine the fact that the data we're observing is more expected on the condition God exists versus some other hypothesis.
Well, my whole thing is, since we're talking about statistics with the fine-tuning argument, and I'm thinking about my objection to that statistical argument is saying, hey, well, statistics whatever.
Go ahead.
So I'll just say this really quick, and then Tim, you can go. Sorry. So there's statistics and probability. There's not just one type of probability out there, right? There is the statistical probability, which is like the amount of occurrences of X within a particular reference class, right? But that's not all there is to probability. So for instance, like if I had a spring, right, just pretend I have one, and it's never been sprung before, if I compress it and I tell you I'm going to let go, statistically speaking, the probability that it's going to do its spring stuff when I let go, right, is 0. But the probability that it will do spring stuff when I let go of it, given our background knowledge, is going to be 1 or near 1, right? The point I'm trying to make here is there's many different types of probability. Statistical probability, or like measured in terms of frequency, is not the only kind of probability that we want to take into account here. If that was the only way we could do this, we wouldn't be able to make inferences about near anything. Like, again, evolution, abiogenesis, all these other things. Like, again, what is the statistical probability of the origin of life that is observed? It is 0, right? We have never seen life come from non-life, right? That's not me saying abiogenesis is fake. What I'm saying is, if somebody wants to object and say statistical probability is the only thing we can do, well, guess what? They can't accept that abiogenesis happened. They're going to have to say that life doesn't exist or never came to exist, or they're going to have to say life always existed on Earth, even though we have a bunch of evidence that goes against that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Thank you.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, just to add on here. Yeah, Than's completely right. Using a statistical inference here is the wrong kind of inference. We're not having to look at classes or propensities or frequencies here. What we're actually doing is we're focusing on what predictions a hypothesis makes. So we're assigning probabilities to a hypothesis, not a set of data. So we're saying, hey, what would the hypothesis that there's an intentional agent, right, that desires these kinds of things. Given that kind of hypothesis, or however way you want to phrase that, would it be surprising or unsurprising we would find ourselves in a life-permitting situation, right? If we assume just for a moment, hypothetically, that this agent is the one behind this entire reality. That's more so how we're phrasing it. So what we're doing is we're using a nifty tool called epistemic probability, which is basically being able to assign measurements of what's reasonable versus less reasonable based on a belief, right? So if I just take the belief, I just hold the belief in midair, God's existence. Does a God exist? Are there ways in which we can reason where we think, what kind of imprints, if this being existed, would they leave behind? What kind of evidence would they leave behind? And a lot of people, a lot of fine-tuning proponents say, well, I mean, it's not far-fetched to think that that life would be one of those things, given the fact that you already have life to begin with in the hypothesis. You have an actual active agent with a mind. Okay, well, we have these here, right? Oh, look at that. The laws of physics are actually stringent rather than lax when it comes to life actually existing. That's very interesting, right? So that's more so kind of what we're doing there. So don't think about this in a statistical analysis. Think about this as a degree of what's more reasonable or less reasonable based on an idea.
Bayes. Or actually, I think the Bayes is too statistical.
Well, Bayes can be, there's such thing as Bayesian statistics. You're completely right there.
Yeah.
But then there's when we actually apply it to things like beliefs, and that would be more of the epistemology side of things.
Yeah. All right, Andrew. I'm gonna let you out. I'm gonna drop you. Bring on somebody else. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you.
All right. Our next guest is Rob Roll.
Roll. How's it going, guys?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I figured let's give the people what they want. I got to give a shout out to Dylan for inviting me here tonight. He's in the chat, I know, and also sent a super chat hoping to get me noticed to come on here with you guys.
We just didn't get to it yet. Okay, cool. Well, no problem, man. What's going on?
You can read it later. It's fine. So
I'll just bring it up
guys.
here.
I was watching because Dylan sent this to me, and so I know there hasn't been a ton of atheists who have come on. I'll give you the 10-second background for me. Born and raised a Christian, but deep within you guys talked about the young earth creationism earlier. I was in the IFB Independent Baptist.
Oh, man. No wonder you became an atheist.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I've heard you guys chatting about this a bit here and there, newer to seeing the stuff, but it is, I think, really easy for people to go from that deep into just this one way of interpreting the Bible and then just start questioning everything. It usually starts with one thing. And for me, it was Noah's Ark and the flood and, looking at some of the other evidence around that. But I don't want to go there for today because you guys talked about Genesis already. I thought, let's shift into the Gospels. And Mike had actually responded to one of my videos from the Faith in Question channel about the gospel anonymity. I don't necessarily want to talk about that today, but I was wondering if you guys, as you think about the Gospels and the historical accuracy of the Gospels and some of the things that we're all familiar with that just don't line up with the history that we see from other sources. I'm curious from your standpoints, I don't know if you guys put a percentage on it, but what is your level of confidence when you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that you're actually reading something that you could point to and say is as historically accurate as any history book?
I'm gonna let Eric go because he hasn't gone for a while. So
the Bayes factor is top heavy. I'll just put it that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with. I would echo that statement. I'm not gonna put our number.
What problems? Is there a specific problem?
I mean,
I have in mind.
I think what I would probably point to, there's obviously a number of contradictions and errors and things along those lines. But if I look specifically at history, I think I always go to the birth narratives, and I would point to
talk about the census.
Yeah, the census. Obviously, there's challenges there around Caesar Augustus and Quirinius, right?
No, there's not really a challenge there. It's not. It's way overblown. And so, first of all, if you look at Luke 1:5. He knows that Jesus is born in the time of Herod. So any interpretation of the facts has to be in line with that. People are saying, no, he's got it he's got it 10 years wrong. He's got it 10 years wrong. No, he doesn't. If you also look at Acts 5:37, he knows about the census. And so any kind of interpretation we have to make is going to have to be in line with those facts. Now, usually what skeptics will say is that Luke is just kind of manufacturing a census. And let me know if you disagree. I don't want to straw man your position. In order to fulfill prophecy, in order to get Jesus to Bethlehem. Well, what a stupid way of going about that. That's incredibly like that's like using a steamroller to crack a peanut. First of all, he doesn't even mention the Bethlehem birth census. Matthew does. Matthew mentions Micah 5:2, but Luke never even mentions it. So if he wanted to get Jesus born in Bethlehem, he could have done that in a much less heavy-handed way. And he could have at least made reference that this fulfills some sort of prophecy. Also, there's the fact that Luke is writing about something in an era where he could have easily been called out on something if he did make some sort of a historical blunder. Now, I'm not trying to make an argument from silence, but you think that like we would see, I don't know, Celsus or even Julian the Apostate, who would have records, Roman records that could possibly even date back to that time. They never make a charge. This is a modern claim about the census that is just based on I think, in my opinion, some goofy interpretation. I know people
think it's the same census as the historical census that we see Josephus writing about.
Well, censuses
like
we know that according to the deeds of the divine Augustus that there was a census at around that time. We also know that censuses roll out over a long period of time. And so it was rolled out, if I remember correctly, and I'm going off of memory. So just if I'm making any sort of errors, just, let me know. I'd have to look it up. History is kind of hard when you're just going directly off memory. But it was, I think, around, I want to say 10 to 8 BC. And then it's not improbable to think that it took several years to roll out and get to that particular point. There's also overreading that a lot of skeptics do, like Dan McClellan, and say that like they're going all the way back to their ancestral home from thousands and thousands of years, and that's so highly and historically improbable. Well, that's overreading. They're just going back to their birth area.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah. Well, real quick, one last thing on that.
Go ahead.
And so I think that's an overreading. And then also people will say, well, there are no censuses like that where people required that. Well, actually, that's not even true. We see in Tacitus Annals, there's a Clite tribe that does that. We also have Gaius Vibius Maximus. We have a archaeological remains fragment that talks about a census where people had to go back to their ancestral homes. And so overall, and then we also have to make one last thing, and I'll stop. I don't want to gish gallop. We have to just assume that like Luke is constantly showing himself to be close up to the facts in many, many different ways. We can confirm him dozens of different ways in the book of Acts, including in his gospel. And then Josephus actually writes later. So it's also possible that Josephus made a mistake, and that's something that Mike has done a whole long video on like a few years ago. So there's just a lot of factors to take into consideration, and I've just a few.
I have heard, I believe most of those before, and I do think, like if I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not possible that Josephus made a mistake, right?
Sure.
But I do think that we use a little bit of a double standard there when we throw out Josephus making a mistake as a strong possibility for explaining why the census is 10 years later, when we're also pointing to Josephus as one of the strongest sources we use to talk about why the rest of the Gospels are reliable.
Right. Well, I'm not necessarily. Josephus does make mistakes, though, in several places, and we can point to that. There's also the fact, I'm not saying it's 10 years later. It's not 10 years later. I'm just saying that it takes time. But the census.
The census is 6 CE, right?
No,
that's what Josephus says.
I'm saying Luke says that I'm saying censuses take time to roll out. And again, I'm going off memory, so I could be making a mistake here. And I could pull up.
Well, yeah, I guess if it takes time to roll out there. So Josephus is saying this census happened in 6 CE. For Luke's story to work, that census needs to occur somewhere between 4 and 6 BC, right? So 10 to 12 years earlier is the time frame necessary.
Yeah, let me
So-
pull up what I actually got on this here so that I'm not just trying to remember
And
off the
yeah,
top of
while
my
you're
head there.
doing that, I'll make another comment, because one of the things that I think is really interesting is when we do talk about this, you know, yes, there are people who say that it's implausible that you'd have to go back to your birthplace. I guess I don't necessarily look at it from that standpoint. I look at it more of like, what is the purpose of a census in the first place, right? If you are Quirinius, if you're the governor of Syria, you do a census so that you can understand how many people live in that area, in specific areas. Why? Because you're ruling over these subjugated people. You need resources from Rome. You need soldiers. You need to I work in business. I'm sure you guys do as well. Like, there's ratios of things that we apply when we put our resources towards something to make sure that we've got things covered. So the utility of a census is still used today for that purpose. So that's where I start to struggle with, like, yeah, it's interesting information to see where are people actually from, but you know, they say Joseph was of the line and lineage of David. That was 1,000 years before Joseph lived. So what's the utility of that census if everyone has to go back to where their 1,000-year ancestors are from?
Well, I'm saying that it's not. I'm saying that's an actual overreading of the actual text. I'm not a scholar like you guys, so tell me what that means, an overreading of the text. What I'm saying is that you're reading into it as like it's saying that you have to go all the way back to your ancestral home in order to,
because he's of the line and lineage of David.
Let me look at it real quick here.
I think it's Luke 2 that it actually.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up here. Yep. 1 second here.
What are you looking for?
Yeah, so Luke 2 verse 4.
It's Luke
right?
2, 1 through 4.
Joseph, I'm still stuck on the KJV, guys. I'm sorry. I grew up IFB. I can't get
man.
off it. So Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David. That was 1,000 years earlier.
So what's the issue with that exactly?
I'm talking about that in the context of utility for the census. How is that useful information to the government of Rome to know where someone came from 1,000 years ago if they're trying to use the census to deploy their resources?
I'm not really sure let's just say we don't have an answer to that. I'm not really sure that's going to be a point against the reliability of this account. Like, just because something might be inscrutable doesn't mean that it's going to be a hit against its authenticity, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like,
I would say it's among the issues, right, for this account.
I mean, I might just say it's a non-issue. I don't know why we should think that not having an answer to that is an issue.
This is Craig Blomberg on this specific topic, right? And so he says that they all went to be enrolled, each in his own city. One could understand why verse 4, why readers outside the Roman Empire and familiar with the practices could imagine his claiming that every Jew anywhere in the empire who could trace his lineage back to David had to go to Bethlehem. But Luke doesn't say that. He says one's own town. And it's also elsewhere language for the city of one's birth or one's present past residence. You can see that in other places in the Bible, like Joshua 26, 1 Samuel 8:22, 28:3, 2 Samuel 19:37, Ezra 2:1, Nehemiah 7:6, Matthew 9:1, 13:57, and Mark 6:4. He goes on to say, only a small minority of Jews in the first century lived somewhere other than the city in which they were born, so they would only need to travel for the census. Most tried to return to Israel for at least some of the annual festivals, so that would be a natural time for them to be enrolled as well.
Mm-hmm. So,
like, again, I think it's just an overreading, and plus there is the fact that in Tacitus Annals 6:41-4, it does talk about the Clitae tribe in the Roman Cline Kingdom of Cilicia, and they were made to conform to Roman customs by declaring their property and meeting tax obligations, including situations where people had to return to their places of origin for the census. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there's a Greek papyrus by Prefect Gaius Vibius Maximus instructing everyone under his rule in Egypt to head back to their hometowns as part of a census. And so you could speculate and go, well, there's this theological reason, and he's trying to connect him to David. But we already have Jesus connected to David, even in Paul's writings and even in these other places. And so it's like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is like Luke being like, you know what would be this genius way of like really connecting this to David? I'm going to invent like a census contrary to the facts, or like really get it goofed up, like not even try to get my facts straight, to like prove that he really, Joseph was even like of the line of David, when like the whole focus of his gospel is like that he's born to the Virgin Mary, and like his whole focus, like Joseph is less so, it's more of an afterthought than we see in Matthew's gospel. And so I just don't buy that theological kind of motivation there, like at all.
I mean, you can see why someone else might see that differently, though, right?
Yeah, I think it's weak.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. I mean, I don't know that we even have strong evidence. Like you would, like for you to say, "Hey, he invented this for some theological purpose." Well, why should I think that that's going to be the best explanation of the data when Eric and I are going to point to other places where it's more consistent with historical reportage with people that didn't feel the freedom to make up historical facts or change the historical facts for their theological purposes, right? Because like if they're going to make up something for the sake of theology here, why is it the fact that they're going to have embarrassing details in other places, or things that actually might not even line up with the expected theology? For instance, like again, people like to say that the Jews expected a conquering Messiah, an earthly Messiah, and then Jesus undercut all of this. So like, why is it that, well, yeah, that's probably historical what happened with Jesus, but then all of a sudden when we have something like this happening, we're going to say that they make up historical facts?
I mean, do the three of you believe that the Gospels are historical documents?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
If by historical well, it depends what you mean by the word historical document here.
Well,
too,
I
right?
mean,
like,
if I read, you can read the Gospels a few different ways, right? But there is a very literal way of reading the Gospels that says, like, this is giving us a date, it's giving us places, it's giving us people. Did these things happen?
Yeah.
So because multiple times we can, because we can a ton of times cross-check and see that they're right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So like if we looked at just like the census in isolation and we didn't like fully even know how to explain it, we would understand that like ancient history can be kind of messy. But then there's all the times that we can confirm it. And so there's, I mean, I would even be willing to say, like, what if like there was another Quinctilius Varus, who was the governor of Syria at about 64 BC, during the time of the census, right? Maybe he could have mixed those two up. That would be like a minor good faith error on Luke's part, but it wouldn't like give you this like idea of like Luke is just making stuff up. And that's just one option. I think there are options that are fully like,
but yeah,
view that he didn't make a mistake.
You've pointed twice though to mistakes, and like this is one of the things that like where some of these arguments start to fall apart for me, because I hold the Bible to a different standard than I hold
that's
other
your
books.
Right? That's your view of that would just that would challenge our view of inspiration. Or
but that's what my question is. It's like, what is your belief about God's involvement in these things being written down? Because
well, I mean, that's moving the subject off of historical reliability, though.
Yeah, and that's no, because you're saying that there could be a mistake.
Would that follow that?
So
like,
if there's a mistake, then it's not historically reliable.
No. We don't do that with documents. We don't throw them out and say it's not historically reliable.
I'm not saying the whole thing. I'm talking about this.
Sure.
Well, Rob,
story. Okay, but getting a story, like, just real quick, like mixing up Quirinius with Quinctilius Varus, who was the governor at that time, like that would be like saying, like, I wouldn't throw like you out as a historical source. If, like, say I knew you and I knew that you were somebody who was trying to be accurate, you're trying to get the facts right, and you mixed up a name in good faith, I would just be like, well, he made a mistake, and actually, like, he was pretty close. He just mixed up a guy's name. Like, names are like some of the easiest things to get mixed up in everyday experience. I'm not even saying like that's the only explanation. There are multiple explanations that undercut the whole idea that Luke even made a mistake here, depending on how you read Luke 2:2 and different things with the word protos or hegemon and all that other kind of stuff. And so there's different ways of coming at this and looking at this. And then what I have to do is I have to take everything else that Luke tells me into consideration. And when I look at like somebody like, say, Colin Hemmer, and I see that during the parts in the book of Acts from that follow the life and doing of the Apostle Paul, that he's getting obscure detail after obscure detail after obscure detail correct over and over and over again. And then I see that he doesn't just do that like in the book of Acts, that I also see over and over and over again he's confirmed in history in other minute ways in the Gospels. Then because and then I look and I see, okay, well, there's like three possible explanations that aren't like really ad hoc or like super fishy in order to explain away the senses. At that point, like, it would be really stupid for me to like throw out Luke, even if there was some kind of like a good faith mistake, like a simple name fix. And so I think, I don't know how familiar you are with the case for Luke Acts and its like reliability, but I would say it's probably one of the most defensible like historical writings that we have from the first century.
Yeah, I hope no one's getting the idea.
Just really quick, we do have to move on pretty soon here.
Oh, though. You're fine. Yeah, that's
Man, this is my favorite guy so far.
I know. I'm just Matt's yelling at me saying we got to move on, even though I want to keep it going.
Hey, listen, Matt,
I'll have to come back, and there's plenty
Definitely
of
come
things
back, Rob.
that we can talk about. I think that this conversation is an interesting one. I hope no one takes this and says that I'm trying to throw the entire book of Luke into doubt. But I will say, as a former believer, and probably this is how I literally took the Bible, right? But when I applied like the God's inspiration to this, it didn't leave room for me for some of the different mistakes, contradictions, and things like that. We'll talk about that another time. But listen, gentlemen, I really enjoyed this. I'm glad we got to do this, and looking forward to the next time.
And you said that, but man. Okay, Matt, you can yell at me.
No, dude, if you want to go,
I really want to say something. That's all, Rob. I totally get where you're coming from. I didn't grow up a Christian, so like, I have an outsider's perspective, I guess, on this a little bit in a weird way, because this is one of those things that I've noticed as somebody that wasn't a Christian his whole life, became a Christian later on in life. Is I see people that grew up in the kind of like IFB fundamentalist circles, and there's this, and I promise I'm not trying to be a jerk. If I come off as psychologizing you, it's the last thing I want to do. Okay, I'm serious. I'm very serious.
I'll admit it. It's culty.
But like there's this like leftover fundamentalism.
Yeah, you're importing it in.
That happens, and that's not me trying to invalidate your arguments or anything like that. No. Because like when you think of inspiration, I'm willing to bet you might be thinking like dictation, or maybe like as Paul's writing the text, like his eyes are rolling to the back of his head, and like God is channeling the words or something like that. Like
autonomous.
When I think inspiration, I just think God is supervising the compilation and editing of the texts.
Yeah, I'll tell you this, because I totally get it. And a lot of times I hear people frame this as like divine inspiration versus divine authorship, right? Which are two different things. But the question I always come back to is, man, is this the word of God or not? Right? Because if it's the word of God, I don't care whether it was inspired, authored, dictated.
Right.
Like I hold a higher standard for a deity being involved in the writing of a book than I do for other areas where I may be apt to say, yeah, he made a mistake. It's okay.
Well, I'll just say this, and so before Matt punches me in the soul real quick, is two things, Rob. I really enjoyed talking with you. I love talking about this kind of stuff, and I'm sorry I wasn't as quick on my feet with some of the historical stuff. But two things is, one, I do think it is kind of you importing that. I don't think that it's wrong to necessarily hold God to a higher standard. But when I look at the book of Acts and when I look at Luke, Acts as a whole, I see, like I said, one of the most reliable historians in the first century that you could possibly find for a number of different reasons. And I would love to talk to you about those sometimes. I do these on my own channel, Testify Apologetics. Feel free to join me on one of those at some point. Also, Dan and I work for a ministry called Talk About Doubts. We have people who are experts in this. So if you want to see if there's just like a rational path back to your faith, or even if you're resistant to that whole idea, like, I don't know about that, but I'd be willing to talk about it with somebody. And because I still am open to the evidence, then we could also just talk privately or publicly on this in like,
I'm happy to continue this one
like a whole hour and a half, and
publicly or
calls.
privately.
Yeah.
These call-in things are tough when you have fun, like good conversations, man. It's tough.
Yeah.
So
I
know
know
anytime too, Rob. Okay.
I can go for like 2 hours any day with you guys.
Oh,
and
I know.
we'd have a blast with it, even though we wouldn't see eye to eye. But I appreciate you guys having me on. Yeah, a lot of fun tonight.
All right. Catch you later, Rob.
Cool.
Yeah, good to
Thanks,
meet you,
guys.
man.
All right.
Very base.
We are going to move on to our last guest for the night.
All right.
And we're going to have a guy on named Nathan. Nathan, how's it going?
Oh
Nathan.
my gosh, bro. No way you just did this.
What's up,
bro?
dude?
Oh my gosh. Now I recognize you. Man, Nathan,
How's it going, man?
we're going to, hey, you get to
Oh,
talk
man.
to us all Tim and I, whenever you
Oh
want.
shoot! Oh no, you can
Okay.
take me out if you want. It's all
Yeah,
good.
I'm gonna take you out just because
We
you can talk
love
to
you,
us
bro.
anytime.
We love you, man.
Ah, shoot!
Love you,
no
man.
worries, no worries. Hey, thanks for
All right,
having me on anyway.
we're gonna get somebody else on, boys.
Is he in one of your
I want to
guys'
get somebody
Discords or
on that
something?
gets to like that doesn't get to talk to us all the time. If you're somebody that is like in cahoots with us, come on, man. Just
He's supporting the
We're gonna-
team. He's just trying to support the team.
oh, I know, but
I'm kidding.
let's see, who can we bring on here as our last guest? Isaac, let's do that. Isaac,
Hello.
hello, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, and you?
Living a dream, man. You are our last guest for the night, so
All right. Yeah. I'll try to make it quick, not like over quick, but just to get my point out. Yeah. I have more like doubts on like the topic of the dilemma of whether God is just or not. That's like where my critiques like stem from, things like that. And mainly it's from like things from the Old Testament, like in First Samuel, like with the Amalekites and things like that, or with David's son, with David and Bathsheba, their kid, and like things like that, where like it seems that God like ordered or commanded the death of infants, children, things like that. And
Tim,
yeah, let's just talk
Tim-
about the
Tim
vortex.
called this whole thing before the show started. He said this was going to happen.
Oh yeah. Oh, this always comes up.
No, it's
so
a
yeah, let's just talk about the vortex for sake of time. So you brought up First Samuel. I mean, I'm assuming, Isaac, you've run into the like hyperbole thesis idea and all that stuff. Okay. So First Samuel, I'm just gonna pull it up really quick. Which specifically are you talking about? Like First Samuel?
First Samuel, 15, 1-3. Yeah.
Okay, and then so is your objection going to be that it's not hyperbole, or is this going to be about like Saul
Or
leaving
I wanted-
Gog alive? Like which
I wanted, because like my thing, I kind of want to come here in like good faith and see like if maybe you guys like can show me that things weren't the way that it's viewed, like consensusly, like things like that.
I mean, yeah, the one question is going to be like, where are you getting this idea of consensus from? If you're
Right.
whatever you're going to represent as consensus, I'm willing to bet it might not be the consensus view. But
yeah, so I'll just start. So like in First Samuel 1 through let me find it. Yeah, 1 through 3. It's stated like right, like where, or I've heard, like I've spoken to Michael Jones before on the position where he told me like it was hyperbolic because like they say like, oh, we're gonna kill them all, and then later on there's even more Amalekites, and but like I wanted to talk about like the specific commandment from Samuel to Saul, where he said like do not spare them, kill man, women, children, and the infant, things like that. Like the specific commandment, was that also hyperbolic or
Yep. That was a mirror. Those are merisms.
merisms? Could you? I'm sorry, I don't know the definition of that.
Totally fine. A merism is just a figure of speech where you get like two opposing terms. So young and old, man and woman, stuff like that.
Right.
And it's just another form of hyperbole that you find in the ancient Near East in general. So. And,
Right,
and,
so
then when you pair that against the evidence for hyperbole as well, that just contextualizes the idea that this is a merism. It's not literally to go command and kill every single man, woman, and child, stuff like that.
I see. Yeah, so it's kind of like an expression, like figure of speech, like these days, like all right, get them all, guys, like kind of like that kind of thing.
Yeah. So, like for instance, Deuteronomy 20:10 through 18 uses merisms. It says all the men in all the cities outside of the land in Canaan are destroyed, but it's demonstrably hyperbolic because it's afterwards talking about subjugation.
Right.
So,
Okay.
right.
Yeah. And like
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for answering that. Can I ask like one more thing about like the David's son?
Yeah,
If that's
go ahead.
okay. Yeah, so with the death of David's son, I also spoke to Michael Jones on that, and he told me that it was that God allowed it, but because he stays away from sin, things like that, like that specific statement. I don't. It's just like what bothered me that statement is because I thought David was forgiven right there. So why would like if he's forgiven, wouldn't like his sin be taken away and like he'd still be there? Because it looked like he was just like punishing, like setting his own justice through David's actions, things like that.
Okay. So this is just about is this just the worry then that like David's son was killed because of the sins of David?
Yes, and like that would make me doubt a lot and morality and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if we have the time to get into this or not. I'll say this. I'll give let's consider this the short answer just for time's sake for now.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard Tim or I ever talk about the problem of evil. But one of the things that we hold to is the defeat condition. So we think that any instance of suffering or anything like that is not the type of suffering or event that makes it impossible for an agent's life to be on the whole considered good or worthwhile. Those types of things are going to be logically compatible with the existence of a perfect God. So long as the death of David's son is not the type of event that makes it impossible for his son to have a life that is considered on the whole as good or worth living, and that includes the afterlife as well, this isn't going to be one of those things that's logically incompatible with God's goodness. That's going to be like the short answer here.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. It's because I kind of have like trouble understanding. Can you like dumb it down a little bit more for me, or like kind of just like dumb it down?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim. I see you wanting to talk.
Yeah. I mean, first, Isaac, let's tie it back to what you originally said. You said I have worries about God being just. The framework that Than just laid out is the terms and conditions. Think about, your checked off terms and conditions on a site, when you're agreeing to download something or whatever. Think about those being the terms and conditions for God being considered just. What I noticed is happening right here, right? And we'll just kind of put it this way, is there's some presuppositions, some assumptions that we all bring to the table, but specifically you are bringing to the table that need to be made explicit about what framework are we applying here that would determine whether or not the terms and conditions that we're appealing to would allow us to conclude that God is just or not. And what Than is saying is any event that we would consider, terrible or bad, what Than is saying is that, well, if that person who suffers that for themselves can subjectively be able to recover from that in such a way where they actually don't look at their entire life as being not worth living, then they actually don't regret what happened to them, but they can actually appreciate all of their experiences, given how they make meaning out of it, right? That's what Than is saying. Then God actually hasn't done anything wrong by that person, because that person's life in context with the bad thing that happened to them actually ends up just being good. Like they go, yeah, everything's all good. Like I actually don't regret that happened to me, right? And so God in his
That's true.
foreknowledge and things like that would understand that. This is one framework among many where we can consider under this idea that God is just. He would be justified.
Yeah. And this is only
So
one of
that's
the
what we're saying.
small little puzzle pieces, Isaac. The other parts of the puzzle here are going to be the fact that, like, demonstrably throughout the Bible, you see God working within broken systems of humanity, incrementally moving the trajectory of ethics towards the ideal, because the Old Testament is not portraying the ideal ethic, right? This is God entering into the swamp of humanity, working with the systems of humanity to bring about the ultimate redemption of all reality, if that makes sense. And so that's why you see things like wars. That's why you see like weird laws in the Old Testament, because these aren't supposed to be telling us what necessarily is going to be like the best legal code or anything like that. The better way to read the Bible in general is going to be as like a meta narrative of God's interactions with humanity. It's telling us the beginning, how God has interacted and entered into humanity, and it's telling us what the idealistic Edenic end is going to be at the end as well. I wish I had more time to unpack that, but we just don't, unfortunately.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for your answers,
Isaac,
and thank you
want
both.
to talk about and if you want to talk about this stuff, same thing Eric brought up at the last caller too, like talk about doubts. We have tons of experts on there that we can talk to you about this kind of stuff with.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, Isaac, I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for hopping on, man.
Oh yeah, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we'll finish up with our last super chats here. I don't remember what we read left, to be honest.
Old
I think it was
Iron
that
Eyes. No.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Then we
we just talked to you.
Okay, we just did that.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'd be in trouble if I didn't do this. So give me 1 second here.
Mike is gonna.
No. I have to. Let's see. Where it
gonna
is.
shave your mustache if you don't do this.
Oh my gosh! Please don't shave my mustache, Mike. Here we go. Okay. Just a friendly reminder, guys. We are 100% support driven by you guys, and if you want to help me get full time, go to inspiringphilosophy/give, and when you click on your thingy, just click that add note comment and say for premium only fans content or anything like that, and that way we know that it's because you guys want to help me be full-time here at Inspiring Philosophy. In the meantime, also I want to remind you guys of something too here, because you guys send a lot of testimonies into us about the work we do and how it helps you. So if you go to that homepage and click on testimonials, all the way on the bottom, we actually have a section for you to share a testimony with us. This is going to be the best way for us to be able to use that testimony as we do our messaging or anything like that. So if you're somebody that has been affected positively by the work here done at Inspiring Philosophy, use this. It'll really help us kind of have a more of a localized source of testimonies, and it'll give us the access to like actually respond to you and all that stuff too. So please do that. All right, let's finish up with some super chats. Old Iron Eyes, just to be clear, my previous super chat was sarcasm. We know that. This is the guy that was talking about us freaking out about Rhett and Alex O'Connor. There were literally people in that comment section saying that you guys poisoned the well because you guys couldn't pronounce his name.
Rhett? It's not Rhett. How do you mispronounce Rhett?
It's not Eric. It's Eric.
Yeah.
It's not Tim. It's Tim. I don't know. Upseas, let Than cook you. Oh gosh. Okay.
Wow. Diddy. Now with the Diddy.
The word hypothesis can only be used for testable propositions. Why? Like I don't know of any scientist that's ever.
Yeah, that's extremely question begging. That's extremely question begging.
Rob, nobody knows you. Jeez, dude, you guys are so mean. I liked Rob a lot. I hope he reaches out to us.
I liked Rob.
Regarding the matter of election, do keep in mind, especially given Jacob and Esau are being used as archetypes, populations are not just walled off groups. Israel was a mixed multitude from the beginning. Thus, the elect in this case is an opt-in for historical Jacob. Any who mark their door for the exactly.
That's one. Yeah, that's all I go.
Broken. Tim is casually eating in the background.
I was.
Tim's just a casual dude.
It was enjoyable.
All right, Tim and Eric, thank you so much for hopping on for this
Yeah, man.
call-in show. Chat, if you like this and you want to see more of these, I actually already talked to Dr. Joshua Sijwati to do another one.
Ooh, that'd be.
And he wants to join and do it. So if you guys
mega-based.
like this, we will schedule for the next one. Anything else, guys?
Chat, am I based? Chat, did I lose
Chat,
one? Have you
chat,
guys?
chat.
Have you
Hey,
seen
chat,
the?
clip that.
Have you seen the Cliff Connectly reading the Gen Z brain rot? Chat, am I based? Chat, did I lose aura?
Dude, wait, Matt, if you're listening to this, did you ever publish that clip of Alex saying Christianity is based? I don't know if you did or not. So there's this clip in the Rhett and Alex discussion, and Alex is saying like Christianity is based on or something like that.
Yeah, just
But Matt just clipped it and said where Alex is saying Christianity is based.
it's too late. Apostate prophet already has it on his soundboard. So Matt, you're late. It's already
Oh
there.
man, it was so funny.
The Turk beat you again.
It seems like the chat's saying to do this more. So here's the problem, chat. If you want us to do this more, maybe it'll be more popular if Mike's here. I don't know. So anyway, thank you so much, you guys. Until next time, God bless.
Sticking.
You made it to the end of this video, which means this message matters to you. If you want to see more content like this reaching people for Christ, you can help make it happen. Your support makes these videos possible. Click the link below and donate today. And if you want to go even deeper, consider joining our Patreon community. You'll get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and a place to connect with others passionate about this mission.